Chuck. Whew. Okay, so now we'll take it easy.
Yep.
Max is doing the shadow for us. Pay attention not to go against the. Okay, we are starting this interview essentially for broadcasting it on your website. So actually our audience are all the fans around the world, all the people that know you, all the people that have written your have written your stories, that has read your stories, and so we have to talk to the imaginary entity that they consist in.
Okay, I like to talk to imaginary entities.
Okay, so Robert, you have been already half a century in this field.
Yes, I have.
Exactly. So, how did you get in touch with science fiction, with this way of life that affect all of us that are watching at you?
Well, I started the way I think almost everybody starts. I wrote stories and mailed them to magazines. And then after a while, I started to sell them. And that was my introduction to the field.
Was it difficult in the beginning, in a way?
Well, I didn't find it too hard. No, I had a lot of stories. I did a lot of writing then, and I would have out 10 or 20 stories at a time. And eventually I sold all of them, or just about all of them.
Yes, this must have been very encouraging, I suppose, in the beginning, because a lot of people face, endless series of rejection before they start to be, in a way, recognized by someone.
It was very encouraging. I feel sorry for those going into the field now with very few magazines out there. Of course, it's also true that a lot of people write, but only a few people sell.
Yes. So now there are more people writing than there were used to be at that time, probably.
Yes, so now there'll be more people not selling also.
Yes, because with computer it's also easier to write, actually.
Yes, it is, yes.
Now there are even people that may even not be able to type, but just by telling their story to the computer, they may have it written and then eventually submit it to some news magazine.
Yes, if they learn the codes, they can speak their entire story, and the computer will type it up for them.
Mm-hmm. Back to those years, what do you remember of the period where you were publishing in Galaxy? Yeah.
I remember that I was having a very good time. I lived then in New York's West Village, and I had a small scooter, a Lambretta. I used to bring Horace Gold a story. I would slide it under his door. I would ring the bell first, but Horace frequently didn't answer his door. So I would slide it under the door and go home. He was very fast. The telephone would be ringing when I got back home, and he usually bought what I gave him.
Mm-hmm. And in that period, there were not so many fans and so many attention for science fiction as we have now. So, in a way, how did you feel related to, the mainstream world? The official world of written things.
Well, I never had much of a relationship with science fiction fandom or with any fandom. I was not a fan. I was not a collector of stories. Um, so I stayed outside of all that. There were less fans, but it seemed even then like there were a lot of fans.
You were not a fan, but probably you have read some science fiction before starting to write it, and have some kind of icon somewhere there that made you start the light inside at a certain point.
I read science fiction and fantasy from my earliest years. I was always reading it and fascinated by it.
And was there some special writer that left you a big trace from that period? Or even outside the field, of course, of the genre?
Well, there were science fiction authors that I liked. I loved Robert Heinlein, A.E. Van Vogt. There was a fantasy writer named John Collier, who I thought was very good. And there were older stories by Lord Dunsany and others. I read all these.
And apart from the science fiction genre, which other authors were very important for you in that period?
This is so very hard to say. I remember reading a lot of Aldous Huxley, Stephen Crane, James Branch Cable, Hemingway, Faulkner. I read a lot of foreign authors too. I read Dumas and Victor Hugo, Hesse, and Thomas Mann. These were all people who impressed me very strongly and gave me a sense of the 1,000 ways there are of writing a story.
And later on, can you recognize other authors that suddenly popped up in your life, you know, with some special meaning for you?
There were a lot of them. I would need a sheet of paper to be able to say. I became good friends with some. One great friend of mine at that time was William Tenn, the pen name for Phil Klass. But there were a lot of others also.
That period, you know, science fiction was completely different from now. Society was different. The people were reading. The people were not watching TV as much as now, and video games didn't exist. So even the genre, I suppose, has changed a lot. You know, not only in the form it took, but also in the spirit and other things. Which kind of changes did you feel the genre took? I mean, the new writers, what kind of...
Well, there was a big change in a general way from plotted stories with some movement and action in them into character studies, stories that were very slow and about a woman and her child on an alien planet, say. These were very well written. They were not my favorites, though.
They didn't maybe consider the quality of the ideas at the same level as the quality of the characterization of the characters, maybe, or I mean, is there a difference also in this field? Maybe the idea are more, you know.
Ideas certainly changed. I think that their ideas were and remain very, very good, but they were not. Perhaps I didn't find them dramatic enough.
Yes, and it's very known that you have traveled, you know, very much, a big part of your life. Is it a cause of your writing or a consequence? Or, I mean, in which way it interacts with your writing and with your life? Is there a separation between these two, or?
All right, I'm spending my life finding out what the relationship for me is between travel and writing. I keep on thinking I'll find some perfect method and some perfect place which will make writing easier for me. I find it very, very hard. I've been thinking that perhaps I've been misguided in my search for a perfect warm climate. Perhaps what I need is stormy weather. It's a shame. While I was in Oregon, I didn't ever stay at a place on the Oregon coast called Cape Stormy Weather. I think I would have liked that. Because if it's stormy out, if it's raining, you can't do sports, which I like to not do very much, and you can't climb mountains unless you're very gung-ho. There are a lot of things you can't do. What you can do is sit on the veranda, drink a coffee, and write.
Maybe these kind of external meteorological conditions can also affect you as a sort of metaphor of whatever. This means that you interpret them as a sort of strange meaning to transform into something else.
Well, I don't know. That's a thought I just had. Before that I thought, where is there a warm place where I can spend the winter? Now I'm thinking I should maybe go to southern Portugal, to Cape Sagres, where there are storms and all that. I probably won't do it, but it's a notion now.
And did you experience a lot of storms when you were sailing from New York to Florida? You have been also a sailor of your own for a
Yes,
while.
I experienced more storms when I was a crew on a sailboat that we sailed from the Virgin Islands to New York. And that was a fascinating trip for me. We went through the Sargasso Sea, the Horse Latitudes, and after that, when we passed Bermuda, we got into whole gales, and there were times when we could make no forward progress. We just let the boat hove to and drift. So that was a very exciting time.
Was it eventually also scaring in a way, or?
It was scary sometimes also, yes. The boat, it was a 42-foot catch, but it bounced around like mad. And at the worst of the storm, when you were at the bottom of a wave, you couldn't see over the top, and there was always a fear that the boat might capsize.
Are you usually scared by things, or do you have things that make you afraid of something?
I wouldn't say so. No, I don't think so. I used to be afraid of boredom, but I think I've learned how to handle that now also.
Afraid of the complete absence of dangers in a way.
Yes, in a way. The absence of any challenge, anything that would stir me up.
Maybe for this reason we also look sometimes for catastrophes in our life.
I think it's possible, yes. Yes, we want a little danger because otherwise we'll fall asleep in our lives.
And in which sense has this to do with happiness?
Well, happiness, you could say, is just having overcome a difficult situation, and just before you start the next one.
So it's very important to have difficult problems to solve.
Yeah.
You can't be ever happy if you don't.
Camus wrote about that when he wrote in his myth of Sisyphus, the great relief he thinks Sisyphus felt when he reached the top of the hill, just before the stone fell down again. He thinks he had a high moment then.
And do you prefer happiness or unhappiness? Do you have some? You prefer in the sense that sometimes you unconsciously prefer the contrary of what you prefer consciously. So
yes. Well, it's very difficult to know what you desire unconsciously because you're unconscious of it. But I would say, as I look back over my life, I do prefer some difficulty. I seem to always go for it.
Mm-hmm. So you would choose for unhappiness if it's useful in a way.
In a way, yes. If it isn't too dire.
Yes.
If it's not like dying of cancer or being hit by a car.
That's beyond unhappiness.
Yes,
that's, the ultimate unhappiness, which is also not useful at all.
Yes, agreed.
Mm-hmm. And you have been also 10 years in Ibiza during your traveling around.
Yes.
So how would you best describe this huge bubble of life there?
It's very hard to do that in a few words. I know that when I first came there, I had the very strong sense that I had found the ideal place for me. It was like a little Greenwich village. There were a lot of artists and writers there, sculptors, and all that. There were. It was a very quiet life. We would get our mail in town. We didn't have telephones or TV, obviously. We didn't even have radio. Most of the houses, including mine, didn't have electric lights. We didn't have running water. Our water was brought. We bought it every month, and it was pumped up to it was pumped into a cistern, and then you had a gasoline pump that pumped the water up to a tank on the roof, and that was your water. It was nicer for me while it was all that way, because we used big kerosene lamps then, and they shed a beautiful golden light. Everything looked better with those lights. Not easy to read by, though.
And what have you been eating 1 year in Ibiza? Which kind of food did you get?
Well, we usually ate home, and I remember my wife and I made a lot of Chinese food. The Ibizan food was all right, but it was very simple. It was lamb chops and potatoes and things. So we wanted things with different spices very much. Of course, we ate a lot of paella, and there was a lot of spaghetti there.
Yes. And did you never feel in a way in exile? Because you are born in a completely opposite kind of society, New York, the core of the more modern age, and maybe you could feel in a way in exile in such an opposite place.
Well, at first, in my first years there, I didn't feel exile. I felt rescued from civilization. After a while, though, I got a little bored and I wanted a city again.
In a way, you were feeling like the main character of Journey Beyond Tomorrow, the guy of the Fiji island, which
Yes.
had just a brief dive into modern age and then
Yes.
survived to the end of the world.
Yes, I'm sure that my experience had its influence in the writing of that book. Though I didn't write that book there, though. I wrote that in Miami Beach, Florida, some years after all. I'm not sure about. I can't get dates straight. I'm not sure when I.
Well, does it actually make a real meaning? Do we really believe in linearity of time?
I don't think so. But you have to waste a lot of words to explain why you don't believe in it.
Well, schizophrenic people usually don't have this kind of approach to time. They just have bubbles of experiences coexisting without a linear connection one to each other.
Yes, a lot of people live that way too.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, they are extreme, but it's one of the possible patterns.
Yes, it is. Yes. Yes. I wonder if Phil Dick ever lived that way.
It's quite likely in a way. I don't know. If someone would have lived like that, probably it would have been him.
Yes.
Once he saw a big face, metallic face in the sky that watched him with a very bad expression for 3 days.
Really? Yeah. Everybody lives in a bubble, though. You know, I think everybody walks along in their own time and at their own pace. It's like this bubble softens life for you.
Mhm. Do you have, or did you ever have, and then dismissed, any definition about the word art?
About the word art, okay, or about the concept of art.
Yes, the concept, of course.
Well, I was and still am very interested in the concept and the idea of art, but I always thought it was a good idea to not get into it. I didn't want to be a scholastic. I didn't want to study what art is. And I didn't want to think, am I doing art or am I not? I didn't think those were proper questions for me. For other people maybe, but I didn't want a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yes, I can understand very well this point, because I never really understood what the concept of art should actually mean.
Yes, there was a very interesting book I read. It was called, I think, The Energies of Art by Anton Ehrenzweig, who was a psychoanalyst and an art historian also. And he spoke in there a lot about the need for a certain freedom in art. His was more about visual art than anything else. We talked about Jackson Pollock, and he talked a bit about James Joyce also, who was about as opposite to Pollock as I can think. I found that a very interesting book, but I tried to not learn anything from it, and I succeeded, I can see.
Maybe you just metabolized all the meanings so that
maybe I did.
You don't need to remember it.
Yeah, I hope so, yes, yeah.
And, well, yes, some wine.
Yeah,
we got some
I
wine.
start the camera.
No, it's okay, it's already started. Some wine also. You want some?
No.
Talking about visual arts, several of your stories has been put into visual depictions in
Yes.
movies.
Yes.
And do you have any kind of feeling related to that?
Well, it's an odd thing. You know, I don't know a lot about film. You know, so I find it very hard to imagine I don't know what the relationship is between my story and a film made of it. As a rule, my story is changed a lot, you know, which I think is right. But I don't know, as a rule, if it's bad or good. I try to stay out of value judgments like that, anyhow.
But you want it or not, you are the creator of the reality show concept. And 50 years before, the industry actually did it.
Yes.
Because in the 50s you have written everything that could ever be written about the reality shows. The television had just begun, and you already had to put there all what would come out afterwards.
Yes.
So, which is, anyway, which has been your feelings and your thoughts when the reality shows start really to come on stage in the world, in the real world?
I didn't think anything of it. If anything, I found it a bit banal. I liked what I did better than what they did.
Well, if you give them time, they may arrive also to kill their participants.
In that case, they should pay me.
Yes, the royalties.
Yes, yes. I could use them. Yes.
Yes. And jumping from one thing to the other, which is your relation now with the metaphoric deformation?
Well, I'd like to do the idea all over again. I think it was a lovely idea. I never understood quite what it meant, but I always liked the feeling of it.
Well, I suppose that if you really understand exactly what something is, all the this means the meaning is finished.
I think, yes, I think that's true. I think that understanding a thing too well can be fatal.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
we have to think that after so many years, the metaphoric deformation still contains a big mean of mystery.
Yes. In a way, it's my job to try to think up ideas like that, but I have, as you've seen, very little to say about what other people do with them. I never thought of reality shows in terms of my own work.
Yes, but this is very wise.
I like to hear other people speak about them, though.
Yes, but
Yes.
and this is very human.
Yes, yes, I am afraid so, yeah.
Do you feel a fatal attraction to absurdism?
To?
Absurdism, this way, a sort of research of absurd.
Oh, well, that isn't anything intellectual. That's just an expression of how I think and how I feel. I'm always looking for some way to turn a situation, and absurdity, I think, is better than tragedy, you know. So
And it's much more mysterious in a way.
it is, yes, yes. I don't understand it.
Yes, I don't understand it either.
No.
I mean, I think that absurd exists just not to be understood.
Yes, I think so. Yes, yeah.
So it may contain some extraordinary important meaning,
Yes.
since we can still extract and it never finishes.
Yes, yes, yeah. I think so.
And the surrealism, this means surreal facts, events, depictions, realities.
Well, it's always interested me a lot. I've read most of the French surrealists, I think, and have gotten great things out of them. But structurally, it's very hard to write something which will astonish and keep on astonishing people. And surrealism used up a lot of its possibilities in the early years. You can't do again what Picasso did.
You cannot repeat. It's against. It would be not surreal.
It becomes a bore, yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It becomes a bad pantomime.
And you can never explain how you happen to do something for the first time.
Mhm.
You know, it's easy to repeat, but it's hard to initiate.
And how was your ice cream today?
My ice cream, I didn't know what the white one was. What flavor was that?
It was cannella, which is a kind of spice. I don't know on English, I must confess.
Well, I'm very fond of Italian ice cream, and I've been eating a great deal of it. But I'm still not gaining any weight.
And somebody defined some of your works as metafiction, you know?
Yes.
In which way, why is it so interesting that? I find it also interesting, you know, this kind of approach to fiction.
Well, it's fiction about fiction,
Mhm.
in a sense, or it's fiction about the rules of fiction. You know, which is easy, which is interesting, I think, and it's easier to write about fiction than to write fiction.
Mhm.
I don't know if easier is the right word, but it seems very chic.
And yeah. And okay, don't worry. All this and we can cut it away afterwards in the
Okay,
interview.
yeah.
So we are not live, and
Okay,
we
good,
can.
yeah.
I tell it to myself, of course.
Yes.
Is there something that you perceive as extremely pleasant? I mean, something that, in any condition, turns out to be pleasant for you?
Well, there are a lot of things, but I rarely get a grip on them.
So you can't hunt for them because you don't know which they are.
I hunt for what I think should be pleasant, but very often it's not.
Yes. So this is. So you can't have a destination. In you know, you cannot decide. I want to go there. I want to do. You know.
Well, in a sense, you have to. You have to go there if you're going somewhere. But that doesn't mean there will do anything much for you.
So actually, you finish up always somewhere else.
Yes, yes. In your head, anyway.
Yes, of course. We are talking only about our head. We
Yes.
don't really believe that
Yeah.
something outside has a real role.
I don't know
Your
what would be truly satisfying. I see that movie stars don't last very long in their relationships. The wealthy people I've known who can afford huge boats and exquisite food don't seem especially happy. Happiness perhaps is something you impose on yourself. You say to yourself, you will be happy, and if you're smart enough, you are happy.
Yes, but if you're smart enough, you are happy anyway.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yes, you establish targets to be happy, and since you have established them, they don't work.
No, but you do have to establish something, and sometimes the best you can do is to get the shadow rather than the substance.
And about good and evil, are these concepts that make a sense for you, or and if which kind of sense?
They make very good story sense.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
So for the writer, they are very useful.
Yes.
And for Robert,
Not too useful. I live in a world in which pretty much everybody I know does the best they can do and the least harm they can do also. But to harm other people is inevitable.
Yes, but if it is unintentional, it has nothing to do with evil.
Exactly, yes. Evil,
Evil.
in my life, is a sort of an abstraction. Now, some authors do very well writing about evil. You know, there are a lot of people who make their livelihood writing about serial killers, which is about as close to evil as you can find these days. That's a kind of science fiction also, though, I think.
Yes, we are living in an age in which evil has been put again on stage.
Yes, yes.
To do his part.
We're quite fascinated with evil. Perhaps because we can't be very good, so maybe in our secret hearts we want to be very evil. But then people kill you, so that doesn't work.
How would the hell look like if it would exist? Do you believe it exists?
It would look like a living room with a lot of people talking at the same time, 3 televisions going, and you're out of cigarettes.
Well, I suppose it's banal to ask how the paradise would like. But you know, since a lot of people just think at a little garden and a little river, I will ask the question to you. The archetypical.
It's the same thing, only you're enjoying the cocktail party more, and the television is turned off, and there are cigarettes.
That's a great answer.
Maybe there are even Havana cigars. Heaven is a place where Partagas are free.
Have you kept accountability of the Sheckleys that you have been? This means all these rivers of identity that may have flown through you in time?
Not really. I don't think about it much. I suppose there's some record of that in my journals, because I keep on writing them. But I keep on losing them also, so who knows. But that's a sign of my character also.
This means that all these characters that you have been don't matter so much for you?
No, the only me I sort of care about is the me sitting here right now.
Well, I can testimony that it exists, so probably is the most important one.
Well, for me it is, yes.
So you don't get, you're not a victim of the delusion of identity, or how much are you of your own identity?
Well, I try to stay away from that. I think it's dangerous territory. It's hard here. I mean, I like being interviewed, but there's a great danger in thinking that you're important. And if you're the subject of an interview, that means in some sense you are important, which means that in some sense you're a liar also. So
there is a risk to become slaves of identity, so
yes.
Because of these little prizes that you get.
Yes, yes.
And what do you lose by that?
Well,
or what people lose? You don't, because you don't fall into the trap.
I lose it also. I say I don't fall into the trap, but I suspect that I do.
Yes, but then you crawl out and you fall into the next trap, which is better than to fall in a single trap forever.
For sure, yes, yeah.
This explains the serial identities that you have wore on through the years.
Yes. Identity changes as you grow older, too. Sometimes it's as simple as that. But it changes also because you think you learn something from a past experience, so you change how you operate, and then you find out that isn't it either, so you make another adjustment to try to live better. And so on, until you fall over into your grave. Your last thoughts probably are, now I know how to get it right. No, but I've had a very good, life, and I do still. My profession is being me.
Well, that's not something that many people can have. I mean, most of the people have to do something that it's not them.
They might have it if they wanted it badly enough. I don't know.
I think you're right.
It's possible. But I don't want to sound too modest here either, because that's a falseness too. No, if anything, I think I don't know if I'm but I keep on thinking of the character Holly in The Third Man. He was a writer of Western stories, and he wandered in one day to a very erudite literary conference, and everyone thought he was somebody else. He was an important guy, and he kept on trying to say, hey, I just write cowboy stories. So I feel a certain affinity with him. Also in that he didn't get the girl at the end.
Well, this wasn't your case. You have had a quite interesting life on this plane.
Yes, but we won't talk about all that.
No, we won't. We'll keep this as a secret.
Yes, I'll keep that for my journals if I ever write them out. If I ever publish them.
So which is your definition of reality in this very moment? If you have one. Because it changes continuously.
My first thought was, reality is what comes out of the end of my gun. Reality is my viewpoint. Reality is what I say it is. Reality is what I say it isn't.
And why do people ask you questions?
Well, I don't even ask myself that, because maybe they'll stop. And that would be bad for me.
So it's always better not to understand a lot of things?
Well, I suspect in a way I stand for something. Perhaps that's why people ask me things. I think of Henry, Miller in that regard. His work, I don't think, is that marvelous, but he stood for something. It was a very natural thing with him. Now, it's very funny, I think, for a person to be claiming he's natural while a camera is on him. So I don't.
Two,
yes. Hello. But still, as a writer, you have the right to mention Henry Miller, Hemingway, and all that. It's part of our stock of tricks.
Do you eventually remember the best question that somebody has ever put to you? of course, according to a subjective state of mind.
Well, I just thought of one, which I was never asked. Mr. Sheckley, do you think the writer's art is at all like the art of the trickster from American Indian myths? Yes, I think it is, yes.
And the worst one, this kind of question that you absolutely hate to hear.
Where do you get your ideas?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
that's
Because if I knew, I would go there and find more of them.
yes. This is a quite interesting question. Why do you think that the people without humor exist? Because there are a lot of people also without any kind of humor. I mean, this is possible, but how can it be?
Some people don't see the the humorous side of just being alive. Being alive is, in a sense, very funny.
I perfectly agree. But I am also of the idea that if you become aware that you're alive, you can't but find it funny. So my question is it possible that maybe they don't even realize that they're alive?
People are shaped to not find humor. They're shaped from the earliest ages. I don't know how or why, but some people don't have it.
Why are all the answers contained inside the bubble of a bigger problem?
Well, didn't I say that in my story, Ask a Foolish Question?
Exactly, which will be also the title of this interview.
I didn't know the answer then, and I don't now, but I thought it sounded good.
Yes, it was just to check if in these years, maybe a wizard would have just appeared in your head and say, that's the question. I hope not, and I'm happy that you didn't find it out.
Good.
Because it would have been wrong.
Yes, yes. But being wrong is all right, too.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, I think
All
we
right.
finished the first part of the interview, which means the interview, but we may continue somewhere else with other arguments.
Yeah, okay.
Because this, in a way, was a kind of formal interview.
Yes.
Because it touched kind of questions that maybe people would expect to hear. Maybe it's very important to have done this kind of interview, traditional one, because it will keep us free from the next time to be completely different.
Yes.
And to be not in the condition of feeling the necessity to repeat this kind of deep things that usually you would say in an ordinary interview.
Yes.
I'm speaking this question, what do you think about Galaxy publishing and
Yes, yeah.
But a lot of people want to know these things.
Yeah, yes.
And for them we have worked. Next time we will work for the one that are more mad.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I'd like to know what Heinlein thought about John Campbell. But I will never know.
Yes.
And no one will ever know what I really thought about Horace either, probably.
Yes. Okay, it's getting lots of code.
Yeah.